In the harsh Yukon wilderness, mining for gold is a relentless struggle. Parker Schnabel and his team toiled for weeks, overcoming countless obstacles. They unearthed $250,000 worth of gold, but it barely covered their fuel costs. Will they press on or, like many before them, be forced to abandon their quest? Will the unforgiving Klondike terrain crush their resolve along with their machinery? The crackling radio breaks the silence, delivering Parker's solemn report from camp. His voice, tinged with disappointment, reveals the bitter truth: their find amounts to a mere $250,000 worth of gold. While it may sound like a fortune to some, for Mitch and his crew, it's a small amount that barely covers the cost of fuel for their expedition. The realization hangs heavy in the air, making them feel even more exhausted and disheartened. For Parker, it's a devastating blow, the accumulation of weeks of back-breaking work reduced to a sum that barely registers against their mounting expenses. As the weight of their situation sinks in, Mitch can't help but feel frustrated. They've poured their blood, sweat, and tears into this venture, only to come up short. The promise of riches has proven elusive, slipping through their fingers like grains of sand. But amidst the disappointment, there's a glimmer of determination in Mitch's eyes. He knows they can't afford to give up now, not when they've come this far. With grit and determination, they'll press on, fueled not by the promise of gold but by the sheer force of their will to succeed against all odds. As Parker surveyed the damaged mining site, a worrying realization dawned on him: their recent gold discovery, while sounding impressive at over $250,000, was barely enough to cover a week's worth of operational fuel costs alone. This stark reality was a heavy blow after all their backbreaking efforts. As operational expenses continued to heap up, their hard-fought profits were vanishing like grains of gold dust scattered to the wind. Crew wages, equipment repairs, fuel, food, royalties, the overhead costs were piling up relentlessly. So far this season, they were dumping over $2.5 million into operations with very little to show for it. It was a sobering thought that their sizable stash of shining gold amounted to barely a tenth of what they had invested into the operations. The crew's morale was sinking along with Parker's bank balance. The rising expenses and meager returns were taking a toll, both financially and emotionally. The promise of golden riches now seemed like a distant fantasy, an elusive dream defeated by the harsh practicalities of business. Parker knew the margins for error out here were razor-thin. One major breakdown or stoppage could drive them underwater completely. If their streak of bad luck continued, the possibility of bankruptcy became scarier each day. As doubts threatened to overwhelm him, Parker considered his options. He could cut his losses now and salvage what little remained of his savings. But calling it quits went against every stubborn fiber of his being. No, Parker resolved, he would find a way through this, just as he always had before in past seasons. Gathering his loyal team, he laid out the dire situation directly. Their path ahead would be a steep one, requiring grit, sacrifice, and ingenious solutions to reel in costs wherever possible. Maintaining their aging fleet of equipment on limited budgets would be an endless game of trial. Every gear, belt, and tire would need to be optimized, repaired, and stretched to the very brink before replacement. When machines eventually broke down, educational YouTube videos would substitute for high-priced mechanics. DIY repairs with improvised parts would be their new normal. For non-essential costs like food, creature comforts would need to be eliminated. From now on, bulk discount oats and beans will replace expensive imported groceries to fuel their efforts. These big changes made some of Parker's crew feel uneasy and unsure. But Parker's talk brought them together again, reminding them of their loyalty and friendship built over many seasons of hard work. With a common goal in mind, they started feeling hopeful again, even though they knew there were tough times ahead. In the following days and weeks, the mining site became like a survival camp. They patched up broken equipment, keeping it going when it should have given out completely. Mechanics worked miracles to keep their old wash plant, Big Red, running, and the cook, Freddy, stretched their limited food to feed everyone. The whole team worked together, bonded by their shared goal of enduring through tough times. And finally, their hard work paid off. They found more gold that week than ever before, nearly 30% more than their best week last season, over $340,000 worth. At first, surprised shouts of joy rang out across the energized camp. But as they realized what had happened, those shouts turned into triumphant cheers of vindication. They had faced a huge challenge and come out on top. Against all odds, they had won. With morale and their money boosted by this hard-earned success, they started to see a glimmer of hope for the future. Maybe their luck was changing, and they could get out of their financial troubles by the end of the season after all. For now, they decided to celebrate. Gathering happily around the campfire that night, Parker and Mitch opened celebratory beers amid cheers and toasts from the excited crew. They shared stories and laughter under the colorful aurora-filled sky. At that moment, their friendship and shared goals felt stronger than ever, even more valuable than the gold they had found. In the wild lands of the tundra, Parker Schnabel, a seasoned miner, faces off against the relentless forces of nature. His crew, weathered and worn out, struggles against the harsh elements as they cling to their dreams of striking gold. But nature has other plans, unleashing its fury upon Parker's mining operation. 2 weeks of hard work were wiped away in moments as ancient underground waterways burst open, flooding the mine shafts and erasing their progress. The catastrophe is triggered by a simple act, a shovel piercing through a long-buried wall, setting off a chain reaction of destruction. Within minutes, what was once a scene of industrious ambition becomes a scene of chaos as torrents of water sweep through the site, devouring everything in their path. But even in the face of such overwhelming odds, Parker refuses to give up hope. Despite the mercilessness of nature, he knows that the lure of gold will always draw them back to the unforgiving land they call home. As he watches his crew pick through the wreckage, Parker braces himself for the challenges that lie ahead. The Arctic winds howl around them, a constant reminder of the harsh reality of life on the tundra.